everybody. My name's Richard Perry. I work for a company called Zodion, based mostly in the UK. Um, we are a manufacturer of smart lighting products and solutions, and we're part of a wider group called Lucy Group. We've got bases in the UK, Romania, South Africa, India, China, Malaysia, and the UAE, and we are part of the large group that manufactures electrical and electronic equipment. The part of the business I belong to focuses very much on smart lighting. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about LoRaWAN and how the technology has affected our company and our technical solutions for a positive and how we are now finding that LoRaWAN is now scaling up into an enterprise solution for many cities and local authorities across the world, and how that's come about for us and our little journey along that path. So we've been operating smart lighting systems since about 2008, and we've been in lighting control, not so much wirelessly, but generally since for about 60 years. And more recently, we've been using LoRaWAN for our wireless lighting control systems since about 2017. Now, we have used LoRaWAN widely over the past 6 or 7 years, and our love affair with LoRaWAN began in about 2015 or so, when we were searching for new technologies to be able to keep our clients and customers happy with the projects that we were delivering for them. Our clients and customers are generally, or the end users of our systems are generally cities and municipalities, and what they're looking for is solutions that not just connect the street lighting, but obviously connect other things. We had a legacy system called Vision that we were using for quite a while, but we were on the lookout for something new. And we had a good search around. We had a look at things like Sigfox and Weightless and Zigbee and other mesh networks, and other sort of proprietary systems as well. All good technologies in their own right, of course, but the one that we really sort of landed on as a solution for us was LoRaWAN. This began with a sort of client request back in about 2014, when one of our customers came to us and asked us if we could develop something to monitor water pumps across a county. This particular county was Cornwall in the UK. It's something that we were keen to achieve, but found ourselves limited by the technology that we'd already put into that particular place. So we took a step back, and although making a technical solution and software and hardware for a water pump monitoring system was something we were probably capable of, it was proving to be quite slow and quite expensive to achieve. So we took a step back and asked ourselves a different question. That question is, should we be using a different network? And of course, that network we landed on afterwards was LoRaWAN. And what that meant was that we weren't solely relying on ourselves, and nor was the customer to get that solution across the line, and of course many other solutions to boot. So that's how our relationship with LoRaWAN started, and that's how we've sort of continued to this day. Now, LoRaWAN and street lighting are a little match made in heaven, really. They're made for each other. The abundance of street lighting across counties and cities and municipalities is clear for everyone to see. Also have the advantage of height, of course. So getting signal to a 6, 8, 10, 12 meter column with a street light on it is much simpler than getting one to a gully sensor, as we all probably have found out in our time. Of course, there's often a permanent electrical supply, or at least a semi-permanent electrical supply to each of the street lights. and we're finding a trend there in many places, particularly in Europe, where switched electrical supply to street lighting is now being energized for a 24-hour period rather than partially during the nighttime hours. And what that enables the municipality or city to do is to use the street light permanently for hanging sensors and other devices onto as a powered part of the network. And then, of course, what that entails is that the street lighting needs to be controlled in a different way, not just by the central electrical network. That which means that you need a point-to-point controller on each of the street lights, and we're seeing that as a trend in the marketplace at the moment, which is quite an interesting one. And of course, one of the big sort of reasons for people to adopt street lighting was the desire to save energy, and more so than ever that is the case. And what we're finding is that local authorities across the world are looking at high and increasing energy prices and looking at different ways that they can move those energy consumption figures down, how they can save energy, how they can dim their street lights, trim their street lights, turn off their street lights, and monitor those street lights in order to save energy mainly, but other costs as well. And of course, one of the benefits of this is that many of the street lights out there are often owned by cities and local authorities. Some of the flexibility around smart lighting systems comes with things like dark sky initiatives, earth hours, special events like football matches and cricket matches if you're from England, and special events where you may want to control your lighting individually and then have it revert back to its default at a later stage. Traditional lighting control, street lighting, has often been about point-to-point fixed controllers like photocells or switching from cabinets, which is labor intensive to alter. But with remote monitoring systems such as the ones that we manufacture and deliver to our customers, you can have different controls for every street light on each individual day of the year if you wanted, and that's something that's very attractive to local authorities. And it's not just about reducing light levels, of course, it's also about increasing light levels, perhaps if they're for emergency services. We have done models in the past where we've allowed remote control to motorways. So if there's an accident on a certain stretch of motorway, we've enabled those lights to be switched on by emergency services, for example. And it's a case of light where you need it. And that is hugely attractive and gives people sort of peace of mind that if they do indeed use a smart lighting network, that they can control it afterwards and then have it set to a default later. Now, one of the more sort of unfortunate modern trends that sort of came back around about COVID really is that there was an increased desire to monitor things remotely, particularly in sort of lockdown scenarios where people were discouraged from movement and people were staying at home and the maintenance crews weren't out and about so much, and remote monitoring really did become very important, not just for street lighting and lighting control for us, but also in some of the territories that we're operating in, city centre people monitoring, for example, to understand activity in and around and see if people were actually locking down or not. And we saw that on LoRaWAN. We saw traffic flow monitoring systems being encouraged, proximity monitoring, of course, where which we're all aware of. The proximity of two people for an extended period of time increases the risk of infection and that sort of thing. We've seen those kind of systems developed, and a sort of general picture of the economic and movement situation in any particular territory all became very interesting topics that some of our users engaged with over that period. For us, LoRaWAN has been hugely beneficial and a really interesting and attractive technology for us. in the EU, of course, it's the 868 megahertz, and we're familiar with 868 after using it since about 2008 in our sort of proprietary systems. So we were very familiar with how 868 worked. Its strengths and its weaknesses. The fact that it's got really good long range. If the network's set up correctly, good penetration through buildings, and we found that those. The combination of those two things and the robustness of the network in general was perfect for street lighting. Street lighting, small bits of data, of course, pinged across mostly every half hour or hour from the node through the gateway to the servers, and if so, bang in line with what we're trying to achieve technically from our street lighting systems. And also, the cost model was very much in line with what we'd seen on our systems. So there was, even though early doors with LoRaWAN, we saw some very interesting pricing strategies from some newcomers to the market. What we found now in the last 2 or 3 years is that cost model has settled right down, and sort of enterprise level costs for large networks. And we're talking about networks of dozens of thousands of street lights. A typical city will have maybe 20, 30, 40,000 street lights. Larger cities, maybe 70 or 80,000 street lights. And each one would require, for the most part, a LoRaWAN controller. So the networks are large, multiple gateways, operating simultaneously and talking to the street lighting node. So what we found is LoRaWAN is very good for that. And the most important thing is the openness and the collaborative element of LoRaWAN for us. But the openness is the attractive element, I think, for cities, and that's the one that's really getting people to think twice about their networks and how they operate them. One of the technological requirements for what we have to achieve with street lighting is multicast. Some of you may be familiar with that particular part of the protocol, and that's the ability to send one command to multiple devices simultaneously across a network. And that's something that we've always had to do right from about 2008 onwards with our own systems, is to communicate en masse with large amounts of streetlights, and that allows the customer to control street lighting directly and very quickly and efficiently. And what that means really is sending firmware updates, which is something that we have in all our products now, or calendar updates across to each of the nodes, so that we can make sure that those individual devices are doing exactly what the customer wants. And what we find is that customers build groups of street lights, perhaps based on wattage or location, or in the type of environment they live, if it's a residential road or it's a highway, or perhaps even an industrial area where shift work and different timings are being carried out, that the user will often change those calendars on each individual node or group of node using the multicast technique, and that is hugely beneficial and an absolute prerequisite for every street lighting network that we deploy. So it's not all been plain sailing with this relationship, but it has taken a number of years, I think, for us to really settle into LoRaWAN. And I remember 3 years ago, when we were first really engaging with the things, and then the last time we came to Amsterdam, it was very much felt like we were at the beginning of something. And I think now what we're seeing is that we are now using the thing Stack and LoRaWAN as an established enterprise grade system that helps us keep our customers happy and deploy our systems. And the time it's taken for us is probably 5 or 6 years from inception to where we are today. And I think that's probably a bit longer than we first thought it would be. But there's been a couple of hiccups in the road, and a very serious situation with COVID that we all suffered from has held back development, I think. With factory closing and for a couple of weeks at least, and development changing, and all those things. Although COVID did end up changing our business model quite considerably, I think it did certainly delay the development of the product. And of course, post-COVID, we've seen this large sort of demand wave of componentry for electronics and monitoring across the globe, and that also has affected the sort of the speed at which things have been deployed and how people have taken up the new technologies. But now we're seeing that settle down, and fingers crossed, 2023 will be an even more successful year for LoRaWAN and the things, as people start to really understand the benefits, and that's the message that's now getting across. We don't just deal with street lighting, although that's the vast majority of business. We often get involved in other, or certainly get requests for other devices or solutions to come through. Some of the less obvious things that we've been asked, I think, beehive monitoring, I think, was one of them. Vibration monitoring for street lights and sort of strikes on structures like bridges. Pest control, we've seen. That's one of those. Some of our partners are involved in things like agri-tech, so things like grain silo monitoring, and even some very unusual wildlife monitoring on some of the beautiful Isles of Scilly. We've seen some of our partners involved in projects like that, and all super interesting. But the beauty about LoRaWAN is that our customers can come to us with requests to use their LoRaWAN for some very unusual and unique solutions. And what we're finding nowadays is that generally, if someone's thought of it before, and there's generally another solution out there that can be used, that we'll be able to help them find, and keep our customers happy, which is the thing that we concentrate on the most. Some of the more obvious things, I think, for us in street lighting are sort of highways electrical type environment, and some of the use cases that we see, controlling individual speed limits for things like school crossings, and where we can use our nodes to switch electrical and dim and change signage. Then we've also got a lot of questions around air quality, of course, because highways and air quality always go hand in hand, and that's really an increasing conversation that lots of people are having. EV charging, so part of our company, we do EV infrastructure work, and the ability to monitor that is really very important. And then some of the big cost savings for Northern Europe particularly are monitoring road surface temperature, so that people can know when to salt and grit the roads, and the general status of the highways using LoRaWAN. And then gully monitoring is the other one, making sure that gullies aren't blocked and that water's flowing freely. There's a great company in Dublin called Donalto that have done some brilliant work on gully monitoring, amongst other things. And there's some of the partners that we engage with, with these kind of solutions. And then there are, real term, installations where we've got people counting in places like Bristol as part of our partner network. Again, something that we may not get involved with directly, but things that can sit on the same networks that we may have deployed or got involved with deploying. And in Cornwall, of course, where there was an interest in LoRaWAN before the lighting conversation started to happen. Cornwall's a very interesting subject for us at Zodion, because in about 2009 they put in an 868 megahertz proprietary CMS with us, and in the last couple of years they've been looking at LoRaWAN, and now they have upgraded their old network, which was towards the end of its design life, to a LoRaWAN network, which is this is a 500 gateway system across the whole of Cornwall, installed by a company called Ver Facile, part of our partner network. And some of the things that they're doing on their LoRaWAN now have started to increase on the back of the fact that coverage is now county-wide. It goes very deep into the county. So a full county-wide LoRaWAN in the UK is now really attractive for the local authority there. And there's a system there called Smart Kernow, or there's a movement called Smart Kernow, which is Kernow being Cornish for Cornwall, and that's to use the LoRaWAN across the network for more interesting things like the anemometer there, or the air quality sensors that you see being installed, or perhaps some of the more water-based, which is becoming an increasing conversation in recent times, particularly after this summer. So we're finding that the installation of a large lighting LoRaWAN is now encouraging the use of other devices. So it's very much, once the network's in, what else can we put on it kind of conversation for the local authority. And that is a very interesting movement that we've seen certainly in the last 2 years, 18 months. So we're sort of focused on these large lighting networks because that's our history, and not just with wireless, but with the other components and devices that we manufacture, and across our networks at the moment, we're installing about 200,000 nodes, LoRaWAN nodes at the moment, in various locations like Aberdeen, which is the image you can see on front of you there. Bradford in the UK, Central Bedfordshire is having a similar system. Cumbria, the home of the Lake District in the UK, Cornwall, and of course, and the National Highways Network now is thinking about use of LoRaWAN for their highways networks, which is a really interesting move, and we should see that increase over the next 2 to 3 years. And then that should lead us to a position where we've got more than 500,000 connected street lighting nodes, most of which are LoRaWAN, and a large number of them are on the Things stack, which we're delighted to say. And the difference between this and what we were talking about 2 years ago is enormous, and it's thanks really to the technical aspects and the overall positive impact that LoRaWAN has had on our customers. And we are delighted to be here and to talk about it and how it's made such a great impact on our business. So I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and look forward to seeing you at the conference if you're there. Thank you.